Julie and Rach. Rachel, you said to call you Rach, so I'll do that. Welcome to you both. Welcome to you
Morning.
both. You have a big story from this period in this sorry period in New Zealand's history. Julie, I'm going to ask you to tell us about your mother, Gillian, and what happened to her through these brutal mandates.
So it started in December when Mum found out she'd be denied access to palliative care facilities, that she would be stuck in her home with casual visiting, and she was struggling to breathe. She had lung cancer. It was summer. It was getting hotter and hotter. I believe there was an ambulance called for her having trouble breathing at one point.
What
But the
month are
next
we talking, Julie? What month?
December 2021.
Yes. And whereabouts in New Zealand was she living?
Wairarapa.
Right. She was struggling to breathe. And what
Yes.
happened?
She told me early December, I'm not going to be allowed to go into a hospice facility. And she told me that she felt feared she would lose dignity. And I was shocked. I was really shocked. I didn't think we were allowed to be denied a health service. And fast forward about 2-3 weeks to the 19th of December, Mum was admitted to the acute ward at Masterton Hospital with brain bleeds, seizures. The cancer had started invading her brain. Once she was in hospital, she could breathe better. They had better aircon, fans, and once she was stabilized, as in the bleeding had stopped and the seizures they felt were under control, they began to ask her to leave. But she didn't have anywhere to go because nowhere would take her. And she was terrified to even leave her bedroom at the hospital, let alone go home. She actually never left the room from the 19th of December till the 25th of January. They only stopped trying to kick her out 3 days before she died. So while she was in hospital, they were holding meetings in her room every week with social workers, palliative services, nurses, hospital board doctors, and everyone was just like, where are you going to go? And because she was, we were looking, further than Wairarapa, we were trying to go to the Hutt Valley, anywhere that would take her.
And show kindness. My God, these were meetings about why she couldn't stay, because why? Why were they having these meetings?
If she'd been vaccinated, they told us she'd have been fine.
My God.
She'd have been allowed access anywhere. At one point, the final meeting where I stood up and I said, that's not good enough, was the best they could offer was an external access room at I think a rest home in Greytown, where we wouldn't be allowed in the facility, and my sisters and I would be trained up in how to do her meds, and we wouldn't even have any nurse support from the facility. It was like, I just said, that's not good enough. And thankfully the hospital never marched her out of there or wheeled her out of there, but they made her feel unwanted, unwelcome, and a nurse even told her to go home, you're burdening your family. Mum cried, and I think it was part of the reason she wouldn't leave her room as well. She wouldn't even let us put her in a big soft wheelchair and take her for a walk around the outside. She was pretty terrified that she wouldn't be able to breathe outside of the room as well. And we did have one really good doctor who supported her, and would extend her stay. It was like being ticked off each week. Oh, you can stay a little bit longer. Until they even said to her at one point, but you're not actively dying. But
Oh my God.
3 days before she did die, they went, oh no, she's gone downhill now, she can stay. But by that point, they'd messed with her meds. They disallowed her Tilray 1010, which had been really helping with anxiety and pain on top of everything. They took her off a benzodiazepine, which was alleviating psychosomatic pain. And it wasn't until the 12 hours before she died that I talked them into letting her have something to ease her anxiety. She'd been, she was in a very bad way. She'd been crying, help me, hold me. None of the pain was going away. The nurses would take an hour to even get to her room to administer some morphine. Hey, baby. Sorry. This is Nova.
Hi, Nova. Hi, Nova.
It's all right. Hey, you go off to daddy now, please. Thank you.
Oh, how old's Nova? How old's
I
Nova?
just turned 3. So
Was her grandmother able to see Nova? Were you able to take Nova in?
that's another problem with the mandates is children weren't allowed in the hospital, not even to visit. That was one good thing the hospital did was they let us sneak my little girls in to see their nana on Christmas Day, but we had to do it before visiting hours so that no one would catch us with children in the hospital.
You tell me these good things like a doctor who said you can stay one more week and I could take my children in one day, Christmas Day, but it's like hearing someone who's being starved say, I was given a crumb and I was given one other crumb, and I'm so grateful. Our New Zealand hospital system, our doctors, our nurses should not ever have allowed this government to make them give crumbs to our Kiwis.
Everyone said their hands were tied.
Oh, it's so weak. It's
I
so
went to
weak.
the Health and Disability Commission, the HDC they're called, and they passed me on to the Ministry of Health because they said they couldn't help us. The Ministry of Health said, we can't help you either, and they passed me on to Kieran McAnulty, our local MP, and he never actually rang me or talked to me. He passed me on to Simon Dixie, and Simon Dixie told me he didn't even think he could help me.
Kieran
And
McAnulty, you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself, and I hope you do never, ever get into politics again. That makes me so furious. And then who were you passed on to? This is what they did.
nowhere from there, that was it. The buck stopped there. They said they couldn't do anything. And then because my sister had the power of attorney, I couldn't open up mum's medical records to Simon. And the next thing we knew, mum was too sick and we were too busy caring for her because we never left her alone in the hospital. My sisters, my brother-in-law, and 2 of mum's friends, we did shifts around the clock. We did her care. We took her toilet. All the nurses in the hospital were really providing was pain relief and a room.
Surely.
And we just made sure that we did our best for mum. And if someone else had been in mum's position, they might have gone home. They might not have withstood the bullying to get out. And some people would have said, like Sean Plunkett at the app, that it was actually a good thing that we were in the hospital, because he did point out, and they did tell us, if Mum had taken the shot, even though it would have gone against everything she's stood for probably 24 years now, um, we wouldn't have been allowed to care for Mum in a hospice, because my sisters and I are all unvaccinated, my brother-in-law, and but Mum's friends weren't. And so Mum would have lost her family if she'd gone into palliative services. There was really no easy way around the mandates back then.
Rachel, how was this for you? How was this period for you, Rach?
Honestly, Liz, it was really frustrating. You know, we felt so helpless. Like, don't get us wrong. Like, the nurses,
Some
they
were
were
good.
pretty accommodating most of the time, but when those high ups came into Mum's room and spoke the way they did, you know, they just wanted her out, and they couldn't even give us a real reason why they wanted her out.
And you're talking about the people running the hospital, the doctors, those decision makers.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, there are so many things in what you said, Julie, that just send shudders down my spine. But you are saying they had meetings week after week after week in her room, discussing her while she's lying there in the bed.
Yeah. Well,
Sort of discussing her, including her in those discussions, or discussing her like she's a third person, or she's
no,
a separate person.
she was definitely a third person in the conversation. It was
So
about her.
it was done to psychologically wear her down. That's what it feels to me. She's lying there listening to them discussing her and how they could get rid of her.
Yeah.
I just,
It
what
was pretty hard
happened
to
to
watch.
Kiwis? What happened to Kiwi compassion? What happened to these Kiwis? Rach, what was your mum like? What was she like? Describe her for us.
She was a very passionate woman. She always did her best. And you know, she struggled. She raised our little sister on her own from age 11. And you know, it was hard. But, you know, she went and bought a farm over in the Wairarapa, moved herself away from where she'd lived for over 25 years so that we could have something to fall back on if we needed it. And she was planning ahead long before crap hit the fan.
What an amazing, she was obviously smart. She was obviously a real thinker.
Yeah, thanks for the brains, Mum.
Julie, what else did you love about your mum? And it sounds like there was a huge amount to love.
Oh, wow. She's the reason that my children mostly dodged vaccines. She's a strong woman who'd done research back in 1998 after my MMR vaccine failed and I got measles and had zero antibodies to measles, mumps, or rubella. And she begged me not to vaccinate my firstborn, who's coming up 19 years old. And I listened to her until he was 7. And then I got him caught up on the schedule and regretted it. He went from this perfectly healthy child who'd never had more than a fever or chickenpox to firsts in antibiotics, ear infections, throat infections, chest infections, bladder infections, and a heart murmur picked up within a year of catch-up shots. And I wish I'd listened to my mum and stayed the course. His health never really returned to pre-vaccination status, and he still sometimes suffers. But it is thanks to Mum that we all knew more and started reading and researching, and were able to turn down the COVID shot very on a strong base of knowledge. She was a businesswoman. She was a idea services team leader and worked with intellectually disabled. It's the most kind, compassionate. She had a way with our special needs people.
Did she what?
Yeah. And, when Mum passed, she hadn't been working in a house for a while. She'd gone into admin, but she still had connections with some of her service users. And it took a while before one of her favourites, Hayley, who was so close to her, was even told that she'd passed. She used to call my mum Little Gilly because Mum was like 5'1", but she was a firecracker. She's a feisty Leo who wasn't shy. She could tell people how it is. Some people a little bit more reserved. Our Mum would just be straight up.
What's your lineage? What was her heritage, right? Or Julie? Yeah.
English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh.
I felt like there was a lovely bit of Scotswoman and Irish fire and all sorts of things in there. I sort of can sense her as this amazing, dynamic woman. But
she worked until she got sick.
Wow.
So she was 66 years old, and she only gave up working because of the cancer.
And what was her way with the intellectually disabled, Rach? What was it, the intellectually challenged people that she worked with? How did she reach them, do you think?
I think it was probably managing us when we were little that helped her out. Our grandmother used to call us the Tawa tornadoes. I think it was just the fact that she had compassion, and she could actually understand that, people with intellectual disabilities, they need support and help, and of course compassion, and she just had such a natural way with them.
I pray that this interview gets to the people who were in her room week after week having those meetings, because what Rach just described is exactly what Gillian needed in turn from you.
Deserved.
Compassion.
Well, that doctor that Jill spoke of before, he saved her life, because when our younger sister took Mum to hospital one evening because she couldn't breathe, he found that there was fluid on her lungs and drained it, instead of the palliative team telling Dee, just give her more morphine, just give her more morphine. The palliative team, I was quite disappointed with, to be honest. Dee had to ask for things. They never offered, hey, she might need one of those toilet seat things for when she can't get to the loo. Dee, thank goodness, she'd worked with the IHC kids as well. She figured it out, and she put her hand up and said, hey, I need these things. But it was hard for her because she felt really unsupported as well.
Dee is your younger sister, Danny.
Yeah.
And I have the most incredible account that I want to read at the end of this. It's just so powerfully written from her, even though she couldn't join us today.
The girl's got away with words.
The question that arises is how many other Kiwis as well went through this? How many of our beautiful older Kiwis? And remembering all of this terror was supposedly to help and protect our elderly. That's how it was sold to us. And this is what this government did to those who said no to the jab, those older New Zealanders.
I'm lucky I kept my job. I was one of the few that sort of got a little mollycoddled. And, yeah.
What's your job? What's your job,
Um,
Rach?
I work for a big retail company.
Yeah.
They actually did something like that year where they offered 20 prizes of $1,000 to anybody who was fully vaccinated by December. I personally believe this was to gauge how many of their employees they would lose if they were to say no jab, no job.
Yes.
Yeah, but I was the last man standing at my work.
Wow, that's courageous. But they kept you on.
I'm valuable, so I'm fortunate.
We are all valuable. We are all valuable. That's the
Agreed.
thing. That's the thing that got forgotten.
Everyone has something to offer.
Totally. Julie, we got up to in the account you mentioned the last 3 days. What did happen in the last 3 days? Let's continue there.
Once they put in the midazolam morphine drip, syringe driver they called it.
What were their reasons for putting midazolam in? What reasons did they give you?
It's an end of life care protocol. It's what they do apparently when they have deemed you to be closer to death. It's supposed to be a pain relief and sedation, but it didn't sedate our mum. She
Not
stopped
even
sleeping. Yeah, whoever was on the night shift was getting maybe 2-hour sleeps if they were lucky before having to get up with mum.
What, she was awake most of the night?
For
in
3
pain.
days. Yeah.
In pain.
I was, yes, she was in pain, and I wasn't really as present for 2 of those days because I was caring for my partner who was grieving. We were grieving the loss of his father-in-law. And so I was with her on her last day for the whole day. And partly because of an experience I'd had in August of 2021, I was able to recognize what was happening. She was falling asleep because she was so exhausted, but she was having panic that she was going to stop breathing. So she would startle awake, and we couldn't get her into comfortable positions, and she cried and she hurt, and it got to the afternoon, and I called a nurse up and I said, we've given her the maximum morphine that she can have, and she's still in pain. This is psychosomatic. And they finally agreed to give her some lorazepam, which we knew over the weeks that we'd been in there, when they'd added that to her medication, it had given her some relief from the anxiety of dying and the high stress that she was in her situation.
So what happened is when they put her on the driver, she wasn't really able to even swallow the soft food she had been eating. So all the pills got taken out of her regime. And then, of course, the lorazepam that had actually been helping her the last couple of weeks left as well.
And what did you mean by the driver? What's the driver?
The syringe driver, it's basically an automatic round-the-clock medication administer.
This gets back to the fact that you were administering a lot of things. You were having to make decisions about this. It feels like you were having to have your own conferences every day about what was best for her without a lot of support in there.
We were, yeah. I mean, my sisters and I were getting together and saying, okay, how are we going to tackle this?
This is what the role of nurses and doctors should be.
yeah, it would have been nice to have a little bit more input from them and not so much pushback. And in the end, Jules actually dissolved the lorazepam in some water, put it in a syringe, and gave it to Mum, and she snored all night.
Julie, I mean, the trauma of this, the understatement of it would have been nice to have a bit more support. Anybody listening to this interview will be going, what was going on for them to be so utterly inhumane? There is research out of the UK on midazolam, and I won't go into that here, but there certainly is something for people to be aware of and make themselves aware of.
Yeah, yeah.
Were you
We
aware
found
of
actually
out
that?
had
about
a
that
really
after
horrible
the fact.
experience. We went to shower Mum one day, and she'd had the midaz in a snorting thing, so it was messing with her brain. When she'd taken the medication and we'd taken her into the shower, we thought she was having a stroke because we couldn't understand what she was saying. It was actually really having a major effect on her.
And that was when it was just a nasal spray.
My God.
The
But you
syringe
did,
driver goes directly into the subcut. Was it cis or was it the vein?
No, they put it into a subcut, yeah.
Subcut, so it was constantly being drip fed into her subcutaneously. Yeah.
so with the midazolam, Julie, at the time you didn't know, you were trusting their recommendations on drugs.
It
What
was
have you? Yeah.
protocol. I watched the International Tribunal. No, Reiner Fulnick. That's
Yes.
his name. Yeah, it was probably a month or so later that he did his midazolam series. And my uncle got cancer, and someone we know in town had COPD, and they were both on midazolam. Midazolam, they start them on the nasal spray, and as they go downhill, they put them on the syringe driver, and it's all part of the process, apparently.
For anybody watching this, research midazolam. We can't go fully into that here because it's not that interview, but there are major questions about that. And I have asked at the NZD SOS conference about it. It can be used, but in the wrong dosage. It can also be a drug that is used on death row. So it is something that raises major question marks. Would a government that was acting illicitly in the world, anywhere in the world, use this as a sort of eugenics? That's a question mark to be left there. People need to ask. You felt, Rach, very strongly that it didn't give her relief. At the very least, we can establish that as a truth. Is that right? Midazolam did not give her help.
I think to a point she thought it was helping,
Okay.
but I don't think it was, no.
Julie, your feelings on that?
They claimed it was a sedation, and we had seen, like, we thought she was having a stroke when she'd taken it as a nasal spray, but she didn't seem sedated. She was writhing in pain and discomfort.
So was it, just while we're going through this, was there any support for you sisters? Was there anybody coming in, any nurse, one nurse who showed compassion as a kind of motherly figure to you, knowing that your own mother was dying, seeing that you girls were struggling to put in medications? Was there anybody coming up to you in this hospital?
There were some really cool nurses. One of the people who would bring Mum's breakfast would quite regularly give me breakfast as well, which was really lovely, made me feel good. But most of them
Tina.
would get in and out and do their job, but of course they're understaffed and overworked, and I can understand.
At one point, remember when they had to tell Mum, oh, we're so full, we've cancelled operations and we're using the theatre as a room. I didn't think it was appropriate to tell someone who was constantly being told she needed to leave the hospital that we're too full.
So you were feeling pressure as well. Julie, we've just lost your image there. Oh,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. So what was her last 24 hours like, Gillian, your dear mum? How was that?
I prayed over her so hard. I put my hands over her stomach and I just begged God to help me because she hurts so bad and nobody should have their mother writhing in pain, crying, help me, hold me. And I just needed so much help. And it was within a couple hours of that prayer that I found the right words, and it was actually a strawberry Ensure that when the nurse brought me the tablet, I had to crush it up and give it to her in a syringe, and I kind of knew that if she went to sleep, she might not wake up, and that's exactly what happened. My sister actually cried. Danny had been asking them for 2 days, please can you give her some lorazepam? But nobody wanted to listen to my sister for some reason. And I do think it was God. Gave me the right words and the right nurse who rang the right doctor, and we finally got her relief because she went to sleep and she never woke up. And Rachel was with her that night, listening to Mum snore for the first time in days.
Yeah.
Our mum was a good snorer.
There's knew when I could get away with sneaking out of the house.
Yeah, when snoring becomes a relief. So she was released. She was released from this. I mean, it's a story. It's a story of absolute horror. Our medical system, the politicians who've allowed this is on them. This is on them. Every single person in every meeting who traumatized this woman so that mentally and emotionally she was broken down and down and down. Did you ever think, let's just take her home, let's get her out of this horrific place? Or did she want to stay there, Julie?
She was terrified to leave the room.
Yeah.
She really believed she couldn't breathe if she left that room. So
it's something for our society to wrestle with. We have a terror of death, and we believe we give our power to doctors and they will take it away. And what we're seeing in this period is they can make it so much worse.
I offered to take Mum home.
Yeah.
I said, Mum, I'll find a way. I'll make my house comfortable for you. We felt so much pressure.
I bet
so
you did.
much pressure to get her out. My sisters and I, when we weren't with Mum, we were trying to figure out what to do. What can we do? But nowhere.
And you wanted her there because she was in pain, and you wanted her pain to be lessened so she could be at peace. I so understand, Julie. It's just horrendous when you think, that hospital added so much horror. So we need to now move to, Rach, I want to hear from you how you have coped since this protracted trauma that you bravely went through with your beautiful sisters. There would be post-traumatic stress from that, I imagine. Do you feel great stress still?
Definitely. It has been really hard coping and remembering that time. It was a really hard month. Some days I do want to get out there with a bullhorn and tell everybody, make sure everyone knows that how stifled, because you feel stifled and helpless, and nobody likes feeling helpless.
How are you coping too with the memories? And I hope neither of you, and Danny, I hope your younger sister too, never ever do that thing that I do to myself, which is I wish I'd done this instead of this. I hope you don't do that. You obviously did all that you could.
I
Right?
definitely do try not to think, oh, I could have done that better. I know there's no point trying that.
Yeah.
Doesn't help, that's for sure. Honestly, I don't know how I'm coping most days, Liz. Especially this first year, it has been really hard. You know, having to celebrate my 40th birthday and missing out on calling mum on Easter. When I think back to what went on in that time, I don't know how I coped. Honestly, if it hadn't been for the support of my family and my good friends, I probably would have lost my job and been even more homeless than I already am.
Right. And Julie, what about you? What about you? How have you got through? I can see in both of you there's trauma.
I'm a survivor, but January 2022, with mum in hospital dying and my father-in-law dropping dead, miscarrying a baby that I conceived and lost while mum was in hospital. I almost didn't make it to my 11th sobriety birthday.
Mm.
I felt closer to an alcohol relapse than I've ever felt in a decade. And I was pretty lost. Then I went to Parliament Convoy and I found a happy place with people who smiled and cared and didn't wear masks. And I saw New Zealand working together. I took my children because I couldn't take them to a pool. I couldn't take them to the library. We'd missed summer because mummy had been going to the hospital every day. My 2-year-old, one of her first sentences was, "Nana died." My Nana died. I watched Parliament unleash the brute squad on my happy place and I felt hopeless ever since. And the only thing keeping me going is God, my children, and my mum's last words to me were, "Julie," as I cried in the corner of her room, trying not to show her I was crying, "be strong." And so I'm strong because my mum was strong. And my father-in-law was so beautiful. And my partner has been grieving all year. He wasn't even allowed to go to his dad's funeral because he's unvaccinated. He hasn't even had a chance to grieve. We haven't even been able to go to Auckland to see his dad's ashes. And the family kind of, the mandates forced the family to choose between the Bowls Club and his son. So the mandates hit my family on both sides. They kept me unable to do things for my children, for my mother. Yeah, I think my mum raised me to be a strong woman, and I'm going to make her proud, and I'm going to tell New Zealand just how horrific our parliament has been. I've emailed every single politician my story, and I haven't received a single response.
Surely. What, in all parties? In Greens,
Every
Labour,
single listed
National,
MP.
ACT? Not one of the 120 listen.
Not one. Just ended up on some mailing lists.
Not
You've
one of these 120 came to the village. Not one of them stopped the thuggery. Not one of them has replied to Kirsten Murfitt's very sound legal letters spelling, or not legal letters, but spelling out the research. And not one has replied to your heartfelt letters.
not one.
What frustrates me is that not one of us is even a little bit surprised.
It truly is a horror story when you see her prancing around the world stage. And I think a few days ago, Martin Phillips of the Chills in New York hugging her and saying, this amazing woman. And so many in our New Zealand community still unaware of the absolute brutalities that have gone on and are being pushed under the carpet. Julie, it's so important you express that grief that's there. Are you getting help? Rach as well, are you getting somewhere you can offload this grief and not hold it in?
I do have people who have no problem with me bending their ear anytime I like. So, I am really fortunate in that respect, Liz.
Julie, what about you, you dear woman? You lost a baby. You're missing your father-in-law. Your husband's grieving, and you've had all this traumatic lack of any real humane support and had to hold up your mother through the most devastating death. How are you holding up? Have you got someone, Julie? Have you got someone to talk to?
I have my sisters, I have my man, and I have a friend. My focus has been on trying to take care of my health after I've battled anxiety and depression since I was put on my first antidepressant at 11. Cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, and prayer have kept me clean and sober for 11 and a half years. I guess I've always, Mum always said I had a titanium core with a soft outer.
Great. You don't forget that, Julie. You don't forget that. She wants you to know that.
Yeah.
What would you like? What would you both like? Would you like an apology from this hospital? Would you like, but that's a word, would you like financial compensation? Would you like acknowledgement from the hospital?
I think the buck stops at the government, because the hospital, they let her stay as much as they tortured her. The government mandates and the public-private partnership of the hospice services and the palliative care facilities meant that they were able to turn someone away. I think the buck stops at the top. I think the mandates need to end, as in the framework needs to be dissolved, so they can't do this again.
And she can say, I said the mandates were at an end, but I know a dear friend who's a teacher, a wonderful teacher. She cannot even get looked at for interviews. The mandates are continuing because this Prime Minister left it in a very confused state. Oh, well, end the mandates, but if you want to keep them going, keep them going. Well, end the masks, but if you want to keep wearing them, keep wearing them. So she's left a traumatized nation in total confusion. It's the worst leadership. Just no leadership, just zero leadership. So here is that point for each of you. I would like you to look down your cameras and say what you would say to Jacinda Ardern if she was right in front of you. Remembering Jacinda represents her overlords, whoever's driving her. It represents all of those weak people on either side of the house who haven't stood up. She is the metaphor. She is the embodiment of all of them, the doctors who've betrayed their Hippocratic oath. What is your message to Jacinda Ardern? And it's a message for all of them as well. What would you say, Julie? Use her name because it makes her be there in the room and look down the camera and say from your heart.
Jacinda, your actions are causing pain suffering. You've created a two-class system amongst the people that need to be united. Conflicts between families, allowing hospitals and services to fall back on your dictates and discriminate against people. I don't have much hope for you. I have a prayer. Let God arise. Let his enemies be scattered. Let them also that hate him flee before him. Amen.
Amen. Rach, what would you say if she was right in front of you?
That's a really loaded thing to say. Jacinda, you have been put in a position where you have the power to help the people of this nation. If you feel like you can't do that, then you should stand down and let somebody who has a real heart for this country take over. Please.
Government should be of the people, for the people, and at the moment they seem to be working for something else.
And a message, Julie, to all those doctors and nurses about the ones who stood there, particularly the hospital admin people, the doctors who tortured your mother. It was psychological torture, and you knew it when you asked for something to calm her. What can they learn? What is your message? What do you want to resonate in their heads so that through the rest of their lives, they will think, why did I betray everything I did medicine for? Everything I wanted to run this hospital for? Why did I choose to follow a scummy politician? I'm sorry, I can't put it any other way. Politicians come and go, but where was their moral code? The abiding thing. What would you say to them, Julie?
You know that what you did was wrong. I could see it in your faces, throwing your hands up in the air and saying, there's nothing we can do. They even admitted in the meeting where I said, that's not good enough, that before COVID times, Mum would have been fine. She would have gone into the services and not suffered the way she did. And I don't know how they can live with themselves. I hope that they seek forgiveness and walk a path of redemption, and that Kiwis stand up and we stop this madness. That's all I want. Let's end this madness. Don't let this happen to anybody else.
And they said to you in pre-COVID times, she would have been
fine.
Gently managed, lovingly managed.
Would have gone on from the acute ward into a hospice palliative service like I watched my nana and my grandma have. Peaceful deaths.
And they admitted
I wonder,
that.
they admitted that in the meeting. That was the day before my father-in-law dropped dead. I was in that meeting.
You were going to say, I wonder. What do you wonder?
I wonder if she had been in a hospice palliative service, if she would have had better care, if part of being in the acute ward where a lot of the nurses didn't know she was dying, if maybe people who were more adept at caring for people in that state, maybe that would have helped. I don't know.
We can never know. Rach, what's your message, given you three sisters had to learn all about administrating medicines and you had to make decisions even down to the toilet bowl, as you said. What's your message to these people who turned away because of a politician's absolutely lying advice, as it turns out?
I am grateful to those that really did show some compassion. There was one particular nurse, I wish I could remember her name. She'd always call Mum Sweet Pea, and she's just so cool. I could tell, though, that at the end of the day, none of them wanted us there. And that is wrong. It is wrong to make the families who are in mourning feel like they're not wanted.
What would you like them to take away, to think about?
Even if you stand up alone, stand up for what you believe in and push back.
You're amazing women. Julie, did you manage to keep away from the bottle? Did you manage to resist that temptation?
Yeah, I did. And I'm now pregnant again.
Oh,
So
Julie.
we're going to name the baby after either my father-in-law or my mum, depending on if it's a boy or a girl.
What's your father-in-law's name?
Dean.
And there's something to think Dean and Gillian are there together, somehow watching over you all. Are there any...
Mum's given him all grief.
Are there any other lights in this darkness? Have you found certain friends have really gathered round? Have you found some beauty in all the ugliness that you went through?
One of my mum's best friends, Debbie, she actually took me and my 14-year-old into their home after Mum passed, because the accommodation I'd been staying in, I didn't feel safe there. I feel really cared for and feel like I've been just bundled up in love. So that has been there with us. Debbie's amazing. She's such a star.
Debbie, thank you so much. That is a beautiful, beautiful note. And what about you, Julie? You've got this baby. You know you had this incredible moral courage. Both of you should be so proud of yourselves, and Danny. And the moral courage not to pick up that bottle. What other little lights are there, Julie, for you?
My children, they keep me. They light up my world. I'm very blessed. I guess it had been a hard year, and to be honest, I haven't liked going out because I can't wear a mask. I have a mask exemption. I have physiological and psychological reasons for not wearing it. And
you don't have to explain. Someone who doesn't want to wear a mask. I don't want to muzzle. I don't muzzle my face.
Amen, sister.
I never will. And I particularly won't muzzle my face to say to a politician, I'm obedient to your ridiculous rules. I just don't muzzle. No human should muzzle. We're meant to breathe oxygen. We're not meant to breathe carbon dioxide.
Indeed.
And they don't stop the spread, as we've seen, because everybody's had COVID. So let's stop that nonsense too. Julie, it's just an act of great courage to go out without a mask. Are people masking still locally in your area?
There's a few that come into my work that still do. That was pretty much the only place I wore a mask. I'm one of those people who are unvaccinated, and I didn't catch COVID either. I was around people who did. Jules, when she caught it, my best friend when he caught it, and I still didn't get it.
Incredible. So Julie, just keep not masking and saying, I'm proudly not masking, and go out there and say, I can do this. It doesn't matter if someone judges me. I don't muzzle, and I'm proud of being that human. And you should be so proud of your courage. Yeah.
Yeah, the hospital where they didn't like me coming in without a mask every day.
I bet they didn't. I bet they didn't.
It was like going through some kind of military hospital in a way, because they put up all these metal gates and they control the flow of people, and they've got security guards, and you
It's
have to
ludicrous.
get a date with the sticker on that day, and you have to tell them where you've been and sanitize. And
so many Kiwis are now realizing this was all about setting us up mentally to be controlled in future years. So they've set this paradigm, and then if they want to bring in some other reason, what, climate change or a monkeypox that we all did memes to laugh at, that it's all set up to control us and to make us used to being controlled. And Kiwis are too independent for that. There are still so many of us who are going, this is just a load of nonsense, and I'm not buying it. I'm certainly not buying it from a lying politician. Yeah, it's so, the fact that you were that courageous, both of you should just pat yourselves on the back, let alone all the pats for looking after our mother, for helping her, being there, loving her. You did help her have that beautiful, calm ending in the end. You have to believe that. I can feel that. Julie, I'd love to end just with a little bit more about the Freedom Village, because when you spoke of it, your whole face became infused with joy. And again, when we're talking about liars, this Prime Minister kept saying it was a river of filth and how disgusting mainstream media said it was.
That was such a load of crap.
Such a load of crap. And Julie,
I had to go check it out.
You
I
went?
did.
You went as well,
Yeah.
Rach?
Yeah.
And
right.
What did you...
Not long before they came in and tore it all down.
And what did you think, Rach?
Everyone was happy. It was clean and tidy. I felt sorry for the police officers that had to stand there watching all day long. I did. I really felt sorry for our police service.
Yeah.
And, they had to see the likes of me sitting on that wall, sobbing my heart out.
Did you ever talk to them? Did you ever tell one-on-one why you were there?
I wore a shirt.
What did it say, Julie?
Jab Cinder lied. My mum died, denied dignity over the jab. 10 days prior, 12 weeks post-jabs, my father-in-law dropped dead.
Wow.
And I stood on that wall and I showed the policeman my jersey. And I hugged my children. No, I couldn't bring myself to speak. It was too fresh. It was late February at this point, and it's months since Mum's passed.
Finally, just to finish, before we read Danny's note, what was the highlight in that village? Was it the way it all just worked so well, the beautiful free food, the little children's areas where they played and there was joy? I've got so many happy memories of being there. What's your happiest?
The atmosphere, the feeling like I was amongst people who wanted to listen and cared. The midwife's tent, they looked after me when I started crying at the fence. My children got their faces painted, and they played in the playground and they did art, and they were happier than they'd been all summer. They really wanted to go back there, and they think that protests are fun.
That's a good sign.
They think it's candy floss and carnivals.
Yeah. It was the absolute opposite of a river of filth. It was a river of love, and it was a river of honoring, and it was a river of true unity. And my God, if that Prime Minister ever uses that word kind again, she needs to know that coming out of her mouth, it's wrong, because kind was in front of her on Parliament's grounds for 23 days, and she sent police in to crush it. It's been a real honor to talk to you. I want to go to Danny's letter that she sent me to finish off. Is that okay with you? And have you got time to stay while I do that?
Of course.
Lovely. I'll just take a moment here. This is what Danny wrote about Gillian. She was an intelligent woman who put unbiased attention on extensive research before coming to rational conclusions. One was her opinion on vaccinations, though I will admit she didn't have the time or access to researching the COVID-19 vaccinations. I mention this because her instinct to treat all vaccinations cautiously and individually was a belief system. This explains some of the extra stress placed on her in the later days of her illness. As time went on, I personally felt the societal pressure build through each government announcement. Our family started to look into the vaccinations, and like Mum before, we started to find information that troubled us and caused caution flags. That's when the health system started offering her the vaccination. Of sound mind, my mother turned it down, as have I and my two sisters. Mum's condition worsened, and we were admitted to hospital for a time to gain control over seizures due to cancer spreading to her brain. She would not be discharged again. Mum was struggling and didn't want to return to her house. She wanted to go to a hospice service. Information given to us at first was hospices were not housing unvaccinated, forcing her to consider getting vaccinated against her researched belief system. Once the stress of that was building, we were told the opposite. She could be admitted to hospice unvaccinated, but the catch was she would be restricted to only vaccinated visitors. On top of this, the hospital started the routine questioning. When were we leaving? The unvaccinated list, not invited to the hospice, included her daughters, son-in-laws, grandchildren, and numerous other family and friends. At that time, we were all giving her 24-hour care and comfort at her bedside. This suggestion was upsetting to all of us, but I can't imagine what that did to Mum. Her final days, stuck between a rock and a hard place, knowing her time was short, her control limited, trying to soothe her family's pain while her beliefs and autonomy felt held ransom and comforts were denied. This is when the vaccine mandates had the strongest emotional stress, inducing moments for both my sisters and I caring for her and for Mum herself. I can't help but wonder what this did to us all health-wise. My message to Jacinda is vaccine mandates of any kind are a form of discriminatory social division, a division that should not be encouraged by the government. Medical decisions should be left to our local health professionals who know their community, and the community itself deserves bodily autonomy. These blanket vaccine mandates are dangerous to people's mental, emotional, and eventually physical health, threatening unity in communities, isolating large groups of the population, and causing stress levels higher than most humans can endure, pushing suicide rates through the roof. Our cravings for hugs, love, acceptance, being heard and understood have never been greater. That is a piece of writing that deserves honoring all on its own. Please tell Danny I thank her for that piece of writing that will resonate right through the hearts and vibrate, I believe, even through the hardest, well, perhaps not the hardest hearts in Parliament, but the hardest hearts in that hospital. Can you thank Danny from me?
Of course.
Right. I want to end with your feelings as you hear what your younger sister wrote there.
So much of it rings true with my own attitude. I didn't ask them to buy me shots. I would have said, no, thank you, save our money. And to try and force something like that on anybody it's just so wrong on so many levels. But thanks, Dee, that was awesome. I love the way you put things into words.
She's a
Mum would have been
phenomenal
proud.
writer. And she's, Danny, if you ever want to write for the Free NZ Substack, we'd have you in a heartbeat. What
She's
writing?
done journalism studies.
What was that, Julie?
She's done journalism studies.
Really?
She
I would-
has, yes.
She's an amazing writer, and I would love her to write for us. Julie, what was your feeling listening to the incredible expression of what so many of us feel and have felt?
I cried when I read Danny's piece last night, and I know Mum would have been so proud. In fact, Danny writes a lot like Mum. And she put it so succinctly and straight from her heart. I'm so proud of my baby sister. She had such a hard year doing the primary caregiving for Mum. And I know she's struggling now. And I wish I could heal the wounds and help her because she's struggling to eat. And she's losing weight. But, you know, that's her mummy. And she's lived with Mum for most of her life. And Mum is so blessed to have had her and her beautiful husband, who is the best son-in-law. He did so much for our Mum. And I know that he's my sister's rock. And his mum will be flying in from America. And thank God she was about to take the jab so that she could come, because she couldn't stay away from her boy any longer. It's been 3 years. He's a Floridian. And thanks to God, she's going to be in the country and dodging the mandates and the jab. She almost had it. She was booked 2 weeks and she was going to take it, and she's a cancer survivor. So I think all 3 of us have been struggling this year. And I wish I could leave my house and all my children and just wrap my little sisters up and take care of them like I know Mum wants me to. But New Zealand is falling apart in my eyes. After they brute squatted our Freedom Village, I haven't seen us all stand up again. And I need to see that. Part of me just wants to see New Zealand stand up and dissolve this government and start afresh for the people, not for corporations. And that's where I stand.
Rachel, what did you want to add to that?
I was just saying, pick me.
Pick me.
Yeah. Yep. I'll do it.
Real
There's people
Kiwis.
who would be a bit frustrated with some of the things that I want to action, but you know.
What would you want to action, Rach?
I feel that there are certain things that go on, you know, the pay packets of certain CEOs, you know, they'd have me look them in the eye and say, buddy, you can take a job cut or you can take a pay cut.
Yeah.
Your choice. But, you know, we could just have such a better economy if we actually took some time and looked at a few of the things that are going on. You know, the government have the ability to control inflation, but it doesn't bother them because they're not on minimum wage or minimal wage as a lot of us are. I've talked to a lot of people because of the kind of work I've done over the years, and you know, they want simple things, to have things more accessible, and it wouldn't be that hard if we changed a couple of things.
In a country of 5 million, we could get this country together so quickly if we worked together, if we stopped being driven by greed, and if we found our moral compass again as a people. Your call out, Julie, I mean, both of you are just extraordinary women. I would love to meet Danny one day. Could you ask her if she would call me? I would love to see if she'd like to write for us. We could have some wonderful work for her. Do you know that your mum is a very lovely woman? I don't know.
Nova, gorgeous girl.
Nova, you've got a very special mum, and it's lovely having you here at the end. Can you give us a wave goodbye? We're going to say goodbye now. Thank you so much. You are such a special family. I can only say this. If I was your mother, if I was Gillian, looking down, I would be so proud of my girls. So incredibly proud of my girls.
Thank you, Liz,
Like
and
she
thank you
wants
so
you to know
much for
that,
your
Liz.
time.
I really feel like she wants you to know what joy you brought her and bring her.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
Liz.
You are a warrior for New Zealand with your Free New Zealand media, and I admire you, and I thank you so much for being the voice of the people who are being silent. Thank you.
I'm one voice, and I'm really honored to talk to you. It's my honor. Thank you all. Thank you both. Bye, Nova. Bye.